What's up, y'all? We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your order. Hope everybody's had a great start to their week, our first live show of the week. A lot's happened since we went live last week, talking about the Pac-12, talking about the NBA draft. Obviously, we focused on Nate Clifford quite a bit over these last couple of weeks. We'll still talk about him this month, especially once we get into the summer league schedule. Really looking forward to seeing how he is able to fit into their organization. It really seems like he's a pretty popular pick for the best value selection in this year's NBA draft class. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how that all plays out. Got a fun show for you guys planned today. I will give my thoughts on Texas State officially joining the Pac-12. I'll talk about why this leap of faith is worth it for these schools. Unsurprisingly, made a post the other day about being just excited about my alma mater and what the potential could be like in this Pac-12 2.0, if you will. Unsurprisingly, got some trolling, rivals always jumping in. That's just how it works. But I am going to lay out why, even if this isn't a quote-unquote power conference from back in the day, it's making the best of a pretty tough situation. A lot of these schools were basically left for dead in this most recent round of realignment. They're trying to bet on themselves and make the most of this scenario. So we'll give some thoughts on that. If we have time at the end of the show, I'll give out the 5 toughest games on the schedule. We might end up saving that for tomorrow, though, depending on how much we ramble here at the beginning. If you're watching live on YouTube with us this morning, give us a thumbs up. Say what's up in the Toyota chat. If you got any questions, comments, etc., throw them our way. If I don't get to it right away, we'll star it. We will come back at the end. Our guy Taylor in the Toyota chat saying, football season is so close, y'all. In a month, this is going to be definitely our slowest month in terms of content. June, you at least have all the recruiting excitement. I guess we have media days coming up, so we can kind of talk about all conference rosters and that type of stuff. But I'm itching for training camp. I'm starting to get that summer itch where, especially when the Rockies are terrible, I'm actually rocking the Rockies today, funny enough, but there's just not a lot happening in the sports world, and it'll be a little slow here for a couple weeks, but we'll get through it together. We'll talk about everything that goes on in the CSU world. Maybe we'll have a little bit of fun along the way. If you missed it, Brayden Fowler-Nicolosi participated in the Manning Passing Academy this past weekend. It's something that's really grown, over the years. I believe Garrett Grayson and Nick Stevens both participated in it back in the day. Colin Hill might have got an invite to the Manning Passing Academy as well, if I remember correctly. But it's big. It's a big moment for him in his football career. It's a big step in the pre-draft process. There are just certain benchmarks along the way that you go through, and this is one of them for quarterbacks. The Senior Bowl and all that are other elements of the pre-draft process for some of these prospects. But for a kid like BFN to have that opportunity to be around so many NFL minds, I don't think officially it's supposed to be a scouting event, but that there are execs from around the league there, like Todd McShay. All the draft gurus are there. John Gruden was there. I got sent a picture of BFN and John Gruden together, heard that they talked for like 30 plus minutes, which is, again, just a really cool opportunity for him. It's a big moment. And I've talked a lot about how this is a really big year for the program. We can't get content with an 8-win season. It was most certainly a great step in the right direction. But you're hoping that that's more the floor and that you can build off of it. It needs to be a launch point, not a landing destination, but something you can launch off of. And if the Rams are going to kind of break through that ceiling, obviously have not won a conference championship since 2002. if they're going to be a legit contender for a Mountain West title this year, I think a big part of that is going to be the offense becoming far more explosive and dynamic. I really think they've got to open up the passing offense, and they've got to let Brayden rip it. He's had, high moments. He's had struggle moments. That's going to happen with college QBs. We got a great question in here from Kevin in the Toyota chat. We'll come back to this when we get into the Pac-12 stuff. So we'll start that and we'll come back to it about the potential media rights revenue. I know the Sports Business Journal article is a little bit ambiguous with its phrasing. It's kind of tough to tell if their projected figures are for just the CBS portion, which if that's the case, we're sitting really pretty, or if it's probably the more realistic projection, which would be the total media deal. But again, Kevin, great question. I promise you we'll come back around to that. I just kind of wanted to start here with BFN and set the scene for 2025, because I do think if the Rams are going to live up to their potential, or if they're going to be the type of program that obviously CSU fans are hoping they're going to be, Brayden is going to have to be a big part of that. I just don't see a world in which this team is a contender without the offense taking a major step in the next direction. I think there were a lot of reasons that CSU played the way that they did last year. I think Torrey Horton's injury situation definitely exasperated it. I think there was some strategy element in the Texas game of wanting to play ball control. But ultimately, what I really think happened was Jay took a look at the defense. He didn't trust them, and he just didn't feel that they didn't have a realistic path to being competitive, playing with an aggressive offensive approach. They needed to try and shorten the games. They needed to try and limit how much the defense was on the field. Honestly, in hindsight, the fact that team won 8 games with the, I'd say, toxic, honestly, relationship that was going on behind the scenes with Freddie Banks and Jay Norvell. I mean, there was very little communication happening between those two. It's just not a recipe for success. And if the offense is going to be what we all envisioned, when Jay came over, if it's going to look closer to that Nevada offense, I don't know if it's going to ever really be a true air raid. We haven't really had that at CSU. It's been more of a pro style offense with like air raid and West Coast elements these last couple years, especially last year, obviously really leaning on that ground and pound game. But I don't think last year, although it was probably best for the team's chances of getting to a bowl game, beating some of the lower competition, maybe some of those 50-50 games go the other way. If it's more of a shootout type scenario, who knows? But I don't think it necessarily put Brayden in a spot to maximize his potential. And I don't think that the offensive scheme really took advantage of his biggest strengths, which are his arm talent, his ability to stretch the field, to work both sidelines. And I also think the lack of tempo really kind of limited his ability to get into a rhythm. Now, again, if you have Torrey Horton out there, you're probably going to let it rip a little bit more from a passing attack as soon as he's officially out for the year. I really do feel like that kind of solidified their stance. They had found some success on the ground at that point. Avery Morrow kind of found a groove after that CU game where he comes in. I mean, the game was out of hand at that point, but had some big runs, almost had a touchdown run. I think it was Travis Hunter that ran him down from behind. But basically from that point forward, he was the lead back, the established, most consistent threats that CSU had offensively. The thing is it cut back on the turnovers, which was a good thing, but it limited Brayden's ability to really strike fear in an opposing defense. And while the Rams were able to move the chains pretty consistently, like sustain possession, they just weren't all that explosive or dynamic offensively. And we saw all the big plays kind of go out the window at that point. I guess there were a couple of situations where you hit a guy and like Caleb Goody's able to outrun everybody, but there weren't really any attempts to stretch the field vertically. We didn't see them attack the middle of the field at all. Some of that, again, comes down to personnel. Like the tight end room was just not as deep as it was with Dallin Holker. It was closer to what we saw in 2022, where you just didn't really have a guy that fit the ideal, profile of what you were looking to do from a passing standpoint. I think there are a lot of reasons to believe that the pieces around Brayden will, help him out in this situation. The tight end room is probably the deepest it's been, top to bottom. I don't know if you have a potential, Mackey Award semifinalist like you did with Dallin, or a winner, like you had with Trey McBride a couple of years ago. But the room is good, man. You've got 3 guys you like a lot that can be significant contributors for. I think you'll see a lot of 2 tight end sets this year. I think that the running back room is phenomenal. I mean, a potential 3-headed monster of Justin Marshall and Jalen Dupree and Lloyd Avant, I think has kind of surpassed expectations for what maybe he's going to be in this offense based on after a really nice spring that he had. I mean, there's a lot to work with, and even the receiving core, which isn't going to have, an NFL star and Torrey Horton like it did the last couple of years. It is going to be more well-rounded. I think they've got a solid group. I think they're going to be just more consistent. I think they're going to spread the love, but I think it's going to lead to more consistency. And I think all of those factors are going to benefit Brayden. But to me, it comes down to, are you going to trust your defense enough to call an aggressive offensive approach and really let it rip? Tyson Summers is going to be aggressive defensively to a point where it might force the offense's hand. It might be kind of a good thing, just because I think that the defense might be a little bit boom or bust at times. I think they're going to give up some big plays. I also think they're going to create a lot more havoc. I think they're going to get after the quarterback better. I think they're going to create more turnovers. I think they've got more speed in the secondary. I really like who they've brought in from an edge rushing standpoint. I like what the defense can be in theory, but offensively, are you going to take the reins off that you put in place this past year? And are you going to give Brayden an opportunity to take advantage of that arm talent, to, strike some fear in teams and stretch the field and get some quick scores and just get that quick strike ability back, which basically went out the window. I mean, that was the one thing the offense kind of had in 2022, even when it was terrible, because the O-line was just a disaster and Clay Millen's getting his face pounded in every week. They still had a lot of, big plays down the field. The Torrey in 2023, obviously Brayden threw for a ton of passing yards, 23 touchdowns, I believe it was. I guess I can pull that up real quick. Yeah, 2023, 62% of his passes, just under 3,500 yards, 22 passing touchdowns. The 16 interceptions was obviously too many. Not all of those were his fault. I've done that whole argument 8 million times. Last year, 2,800 yards, 14 touchdowns through the air, cut the turnovers down to 9 interceptions. You want him to build off of it. You want kind of the best of the both worlds. And if this team is going to be what we want it to be, and as Kevin says, after how last season ended, can't win less games in the Mountain West, I will say I think the Mountain West schedule is going to be significantly more challenging. You've got Boise and UNLV this year. You got to go to Boise, to Wyoming. Air Force is going to be much improved. It's going to be a tougher schedule, and there's no doubt about that. But we're to a point in year 4 under Norvell where that's not really an acceptable excuse for this team's shortcomings, if that is what happens. You've got a lot of athleticism on both sides of the ball. You've got a third-year starting quarterback, which traditionally has meant really good things for the offense. And I've actually rambled on here longer than I intended to. We'll get to that point here in just a second, and then we'll talk about the Pac-12 and the Texas State stuff. But basically, it's give and take, right? You've got to put your quarterback in a position to take advantage of his strengths, to give him an opportunity to make some plays happen in the first place, knowing that if you do that, there are going to be times where you turn the ball over. I think we fixate on turnovers so much more because of social media and YouTube and the clips and everybody sharing them 8 million times than we did back in the day. You go back and you look at the interception numbers for even like Bradlee Van Pelt, Moses Moreno, all these guys. Justin Holland was a dude who really turned the ball over. But I don't know. I just feel like we absolutely fixate on them now to a point where we're not able to understand that they're a product of aggressiveness. Like, you don't want your quarterback throwing 20 interceptions, no doubt about that. But if you're throwing 1 a game, but you're throwing for 300 plus passing yards, you're throwing for 20 plus touchdowns, that's a completely healthy ratio. That's a place where you can live and thrive and have success. There are exceptions. You get the Manning types. Grayson in 2014, his numbers were absurd. He 32 touchdowns, only 7 picks. Like that doesn't happen very often. That'd be great if you got that type of production, but that's an anomaly more than it's the the norm. Big things potentially, though, for him in year 3. We're going to get to that in just a second. Let's take a quick break. Let's shout out a couple of our partners, and we'll keep this rolling. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you're looking for some gear to make your brand stand apart from the crowd, Branded Bills has you covered with the best custom headwear. Start your order, and their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel you need. Maybe you want to get some custom hats for a bachelor party or something like that. Maybe you've got a little gang of friends, like a Wild Hogs type situation. Who knows? Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. I also want to shout out our friends over at Cake Mortgage. Cake is the business owner's home mortgage partners. They specialize in non-QM loans. What some of the problems that they solve for individuals, it can be hard to get approved for loans. If you are somebody who's an independent contractor, if you are self-employed and have your own business, honestly, the whole tax process can become really a nightmare. Like, as somebody who was an independent contractor for a long time, I can promise you that. If you're a regular employee, you're going to get a W-2. Your income shows on your tax return. Traditional lenders love this because it's simple. It's more complicated for business owners. By maximizing legitimate business deductions and expenses, business owners can reduce their taxable income and keep more money in the business. This means that their tax returns show little income. Most lenders don't understand this type of complex income, so they're going to get denied for home loans, refinancing, whatever you're trying to do. Cake can get business owners approved by validating your cash flow through bank statements, certified profit and loss statements, or business tax returns. It's good for creative professionals, contractors, tech entrepreneurs, business founders. Check it out. Head to the link in the description to get started. Cake Mortgage Corporation, equal housing lenders, NMLS number 1734623, licensed in Colorado by the Division of Real Estate. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, so I have been rambling on this a little bit longer than I intended, so I'm going to get to the point here, which is that there are a lot of factors for why the offense has been a little bit erratic these last couple of years. I think there's some rational decision-making that went behind the scheme changes last year, just based on some of the extenuating circumstances that they had to deal with, Torrey Horton's injury being one of them. In year 3, with a quarterback who has this much experience under his belt, who has proven arm talent, and who is going to have the weapons necessary around him to play a more aggressive approach, there's no more excuses. They've got to take the reins off. They've got to let this passing offense do its thing. Otherwise, I just don't see a world in which the Rams are legitimate contenders. I mean, I think they could make a bowl game playing similarly to the way they did last year, but I think when you play the truly good teams, both in the non-conference and, potentially the postseason or beyond, I think it's just going to limit the type of wins you're going to be able to pull off. Like, yeah, you can beat up on the 500 teams. You can beat up on the middle of the road teams, but can you beat another 9-win team? Can you beat a 10-win team? Can you make the season interesting like it was in 2014? If that's going to happen, I think a big part of that is Brayden having to put up his biggest numbers yet. And when you look at the history, there is some precedent there. Like, Nick Stevens and Garrett Grayson were not the quarterback their sophomore year that they finished up on. And I've talked about at times how fans, in my opinion, have been a little hypercritical of Brayden. I think the arm talent is there. I think the potential for him to really break out is there. But there is a track record there, which is encouraging. You look back at Nick Stevens in 2017. I completed 62% of his passes, 3,800 yards, 29 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, threw for about 292 yards a game. Grayson in 2014, about as well as we've seen anybody play the position at CSU in the 21st century. 64% of his passes on 420 attempts, 4,006 yards to the air, 32 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, about 308 yards a game. Again, what Grayson did in 2014 was next level. I'm not saying you should hope for that, but I don't think Nick Stevens in 2017 type efficiency or mastery of the offense is out of this question. Bradlee Van Pelt, not the most traditional, pocket passing quarterback, more of a dual threat, run around, make it happen type guy. He completed 61% of his passes in year 3, which was a significant bump from what we saw from him in 01 or 02. 19 touchdowns, still had 13 interceptions. Again, as much as people love BVP, I do think people forget he turned the ball over a little bit. 219 yards a game, but he also rushed for 900 yards that year and 10 touchdowns. He had like 21 rushing touchdowns between his junior and senior seasons. One of the most exciting college football players that we've ever gotten to watch in Fort Collins. But I'm just saying, like, there's a proven track record of quarterbacks in year 3. And although that's becoming a rarer and rarer occurrence in the transfer portal era, when they are able to get to that point in their careers, it's typically when we really see them skyrocket and kind of fully reach their potential. And again, like, if CSU is going to be a team that builds off of what they did in 2024, wins more than 8 games, beating multiple rivals, is a legitimate contender in the Mountain West, which you would hope they could be, especially with a lot of roster turnover and coaching changes around the conference. Like, the stability you have is a strength. Now is the moment. Can you seize it? Can you strike while the iron's hot? Can you generate some momentum? Go out on top in the Mountain West. It's been over 2 decades since you won the league, but you won it 3 times in 5 years before that. I've got 5 conference titles in my lifetime. It's been far too long since we've seen them do it. But again, I just think if that's going to be a realistic hope for this team, it's got to be in line with Brayden taking a major leap. And I think he has all of the physical abilities to do so. I think he's grown as a leader these last couple of years. And I do think that that's hopefully another factor that will kind of benefit the team as a whole. I do think there was just an odd dynamic in that locker room, especially like 2022, 2023, when you still had guys from the Bobo even and Adazio regimes trying to come together with all the Nevada transfers. Like, it was a little bit of an island of misfit toys there for a while. And even like from a team leadership standpoint, the dynamic of having 5th-year guys that both transferred in, guys like Gardner, like Patty Turner, who were leaders. But then you also had, Blackburn and Howell and these guys who had been at CSU forever and were definitely leaders. And it just kind of created a weird situation where the quarterback was, not one of the prominent. He was still a leader on the team, don't get me wrong, but he like wasn't a team captain. It made kind of a wonky dynamic. And I just think this is a more natural order, I guess, if it makes sense. Like, I think the best teams do lean into their quarterback's personality. And I think Brayden he's got the personality, like the BVP type charisma and the confidence in himself, which again, I do think was something that was lacking before he took over. Not trying to throw shots at Clay Millen or anything like that. You could just feel the spark when Brayden took over. He's had some inconsistencies for a variety of factors, but if he is able to reach the potential that I believe he has, I really do feel like this team could do something pretty special this year. So we shall see. We'll talk about that a lot. We'll see where he ends up in terms of the preseason all conference voting. My guess is that Maddox Madsen will be the guy. I went back and forth. I did vote for Madsen. I just felt like, as the returning conference champ who led the league in passing touchdowns and yards, like, you got to give him the nod. I've pointed out a bunch of times that I think physically I would take BFN over him. I'd take Walker Eget, even of San Jose State, over him. But he obviously is on the crown until somebody else is able to take it. So we'll see how all of that pans out. I know I rambled on longer than I probably needed to for you guys to get that point, but it's summer and we've got a whole show to fill. So don't hate me. All right, let's move on. Let's get into the Pac-12 stuff. We can start the conversation. We'll have to take a break in a couple minutes once we get going here. But if you missed it, Texas State is officially official. I've done the pros and cons a million times. We talked about it last Friday, for instance. If you missed it, I don't want to be too repetitive here and make the same points that we've all been making for a year plus. One of the things I was excited about was finally just having a little bit of stability, hopefully, and hopefully getting rid of the rampant speculation 24/7. There's always going to be speculation, and I'll do a little bit today. I mean, it's just part of the content gig, but it's just nice to not have to do the, so are they in or are they out? Will they, won't they type deal. It was all getting really old. I've been honest from the beginning. Texas State is not a move that really, moves the needle in a major way. I don't think they're a school that when all of this started last September and we're all talking about the potential moves the league could make, I don't think a lot of people had Texas State super high on their board. I think they were rightfully and realistically one of the floated potential expansion moves. And I think that logistically, especially after how all of this has played out, and I talked about this on Friday, but with given the difference in buyout, being able to get them for $5 million versus around 30 million if you're going for an AAC school. I think it's like 20 to 25 for Mountain West school. Like, it makes sense given the restraints that you have financially at the moment. Obviously, from a geographic standpoint, getting into Texas, the football hotbed of the world, that's ideal. There's a reason that every league for the last 30 years has been working really hard to get into Texas, and that even includes the bigger conferences. Like the SEC was the big bad league. They'd won all of the national championships for 15 years, and what do? They make a move to get into Texas because it's just a huge asset from a recruiting standpoint, from a visibility standpoint. If you play the NCAA college video game, it's funny, but some of those conversations, like when you're doing the recruiting pitch, oh, we'll play a game in your home state, that kind of stuff matters. Like being able to tell kids we will, be able to play in front of your friends and your family. That's huge. Being able to just be more recognizable in Texas is big from a recruitment standpoint. Like how much are some of those kids watching some of the leagues that don't have Texas schools? Like there's a lot of reason why it makes sense. It's obviously a school that's on the rise. Their enrollment has been steadily increasing by like 6% the last couple of years. I mean, you got I keep trying to say alumni base, but what I mean is a student base of 40,000. Like, you don't scoff at any of that. It's in an up and coming area. You're in between like San Antonio and Austin. Like, there's a lot to like. But the cynics, and they are right to some extent, will say that this was a move based out of desperation, and there is some validity to that. I mean, your options were slim, and you needed an 8th football member to make this all work for 2026. That's just the cold, hard truth. I do think that they took a run at some other schools, and for a variety of reasons, it didn't work out, basically just because of logistics and finances. But, they took a run at Memphis, and I'm sure they took a hard look at UTSA and Tulane and some of those schools. But again, you're coming back to the same dilemma, which is a $30 million buyout to potentially not significantly increase your media rights deal based on a lot of the national reporting over the last 6 months. Whether you add Memphis, whether you add Tulane at this point, it really doesn't do a ton to bump how the TV outlets are going to view the Pac-12. It's not going to, be the big difference, like not going to double your money or something like that. And if that's the case, you question, is spending all that money up front when we've already got the headache with the Mountain West, when there are no guarantees for what our return is ultimately going to be? Do we want to increase all of our travel costs for a school like Memphis, who doesn't really seem all that jazzed about the potential of the Pac-12 anyways? And then you just start looking at your other options. They went back around on UNLV. To the Mountain West credit, they played hardball. They were able to lock down Air Force and UNLV with some sweetheart deals. And I do think that without that, the Mountain West probably would have fallen apart. I think that UNLV likely ends up in the Pac-12. I think some other schools probably get to the American, like Air Force in Wyoming, New Mexico, those type of schools. Who knows, maybe some other schools as well end up in Conference USA, like something like that. I mean, I will credit Gloria Nevarez for holding the league together after she got put in a pretty tough spot. But the reverse merger was never going to happen. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a second. I as a Mountain West guy, would have supported it, but it just wasn't in the cards. And to the people that keep saying like, oh, this Pac-12 and the Mountain West are the same picture, I encourage you to put the two graphics of the schools up side by side and tell me with a straight face they're the same picture. While you look at UC Davis and Northern Illinois and some of these other schools that have been added. Like, they didn't have very many options. So I'm not saying this to be a jerk or to be dismissive. Like, I credit the Mountain West for finding a way to make this work, and for admittedly throwing a wrench in the Pac-12's process here. But at the end of the day, this is a leap of faith. It's a belief in something more. It's these schools gambling on themselves. And there's a reason why a school like Texas State is more appealing than some of the low-end schools in the Mountain West. And a lot of that comes down to a willingness to invest and a willingness to be bold and bet on themselves, which I just don't think was the case with schools like San Jose State and, even New Mexico and Nevada. And some of that is due to things that are out of their control. Like, they just don't have the money. Maybe they, in an ideal world, would be willing to do all of that, but they can't. Either way, though, if you're a business, if you're trying to build this league, you're just trying to do what's best for you guys in your future. And there are no friends in this process, really. And there's no love lost either. Let's pause real quick. Let me catch my breath. Let's take a quick break, and then we will shout out a couple of our partners here. Okay. If you're looking for banking that plays at your pace, whether you're tailgating, grabbing halftime snacks, or catching the game from the couch, First Bank is in your corner. With their secure, easy-to-use mobile banking app, you can check your balance, split the tab for stadium nachos, and stay on top of your money anytime, anywhere. It's like having a financial MVP in your pocket. Here's the play that pays. You could earn $300 when you open a new First Bank account. You could use that on anything. Maybe you want to buy yourself a new iPad. Maybe you want to put down a little deposit on season tickets for CSU football. Maybe, the Nuggets. Maybe you want to get some Nuggets season tickets. The vibes are pretty good in Nuggets Nation right now after the most recent moves. Whatever, it's your money. You do with it as you choose. But what's great about First Bank is they give you the ability to do so. They allow you to manage your money and have it feel like a win, no games, just solid tools to help you stay in control right from your phone. Ready to take your banking game to the next level? Head to efirstbank.com/bonus. That's efirstbank.com/bonus. Certain restrictions and requirements do apply. Member FDIC. I also want to shout out our friends at Mando. Mando's a men's deodorant that's hyper-focused on keeping every aspect of a man's body smelling fresh and clean, and they mean every aspect. Get your shot glasses ready, y'all. It's good for all of the smelly zones. We're talking your pits. We're talking your butt crack. We're talking your belly button. We're talking the grundle. The scents are geared towards men with options like bourbon leather, Cloverwoods, Mount Fuji, and Pro Sport. They've got all kinds of great options, and you know that it's going to work. It's created by a doctor who saw firsthand the way that BO was being mistreated and misdiagnosed. It's clinically proven to control odor better than a shower with soap alone. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash or deodorant wipes, plus free shipping. It's a special offer for our listeners. New customers get $5 off their starter pack with the exclusive code. That comes to over 40% off your starter pack. Use that code DNVR at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Please support our show. Tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. All right, I appreciate everybody rocking with us in the Toyota chat. The Grundle jokes are always funny. They will always make me laugh, and I like that that's become a recurring bit with everybody in the Toyota chat. All right, before we went to break there, I was leading into the commentary, which is coming from all circles. There's people that are bitter on the Mountain West side, and I understand their beef far more than some of the ignorant commentary that's come from national circles. I've explained why it annoys me when I see people, especially people associated with the bigger programs, who are the reason we are in this position in the first place, who killed the original Pac-12 for no good reason, who shook up, went to the Big Ten and then the ACC and the Big 12. And I see some of these people who support, like Texas and Oklahoma and Oregon, and they roll their eyes and they make the petty little comments of like, basically, oh, it's just the same picture. It's the Pam meme from The Office, when it's not even close. Like, you look at the metrics, you look at the the success from a football and basketball standpoint, it's very clear which side of the street you would rather be on if you were one of these programs. Having said all of that, I don't say that to be dismissive of the Mountain West or to put those programs down. The Mountain West is all that I've known. I'm 30. Like the league formed when I was 4 years old. I started getting into CSU football when I was about 7. That 2002 season is really what had me hooked. Bradlee Van Pelt was the coolest dude I'd ever seen. I was in from the head spike on. I was a Ram. Like it was signed, sealed, delivered. There was no going back. And I'm not rooting for a lot of these schools that I've known for my entire life to just fall into oblivion. I feel for them. I do, because they're victims of circumstance. They're in a even crappier situation than schools like CSU and Boise were left in, because some of these bigger schools decided to make all these moves. And is the Pac-12 2.0 going to be the Pac-12 of old with USC, with UCLA, with Oregon and Washington? No, it's not going to be. I don't think anybody of these schools, outside of, like, there's always some dorks online, but I don't think anybody who has any type of common sense or looks at the situation rationally is trying to sell that. I don't think any of us are trying to make it seem as if we're jumping to the SEC or the Big Ten. It's not even going to like the Big 12 in 2014 before they lost Texas and Oklahoma. As much as some of the Big 12 fans love to get high and mighty, I've pointed this out a couple of times. I think the Big 12 and the ACC are a hell of a lot closer on the spectrum to the Pac-12 2.0 than they are to swimming in the waters with the SEC and the Big Ten. That's nor here nor there. All of these schools, CSU, Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, even Texas State, obviously Oregon State and Washington State in the most recent realignment moves, we all got left behind. The Big 12 told us they didn't want us. A lot of these schools had been pushing for the Big 12 going back to 2014. Boise and San Diego State, they've been desperately trying to get out of the Mountain West for a decade. They both agreed to go to the Big East until that thing fell apart. San Diego State did leave the Mountain West technically and went to the Pac-12 for a half a second there. But those schools, somehow, some way, they were going to get out at some point, because Boise State's the premier G5 football brand left on the table. San Diego State's the premier men's basketball brand, along with Gonzaga. Now the Pac-12 has been able to add both of those, which is awesome. But to simplify things here, like, we all got left for dead. We all got told we weren't wanted. When the Big 12 had an opportunity to backfill after Texas and Oklahoma left, they went and they got Cincinnati, they got UCF. A lot of that comes down to geography, again, which is making sense of Texas State. Like, geography is such a massive factor in all of this. But they decided they don't want CSU. They don't want Boise State. And so our options are to sit tight and do nothing and watch the world, go by and get left behind and fall into irrelevance and not be even close to what we envisioned when we invested all this money in Canvas Stadium. And, when we saw what the program could be under Sonny Lubick in the early 2000s, we're taking a leap of faith. We're betting on ourselves that this investment and commitment to athletics and this belief that we can be something greater than we are is going to pay off in the long run. And there's no guarantees of that. Like, I feel good about the decision, whether, your meteorites deal ends up being $8 million, which, hey, if you double your money over a 5-year span, that'd be another $20 million in revenue coming your way. That's a win to me. Or if you could get that 10 plus million, now all of a sudden we're really cooking with some fire. But I guess I just would point out to the cynics and even the people in the CSU side of things, as Josh says, the thing that is annoying me with CSU fans bringing up Texas State history, acting like we weren't in the same situation of apathy not that long ago. I'm with you, man. Like, I don't know what else we were really supposed to do. As a lifelong Mountain West guy, I would have supported the possibility of a reverse merger. I understand, though, why Oregon State, why Washington State, from an optical standpoint, they didn't want to go from being associated with USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington to now being in a league with Nevada, New Mexico, and San Jose State. That's just the reality. those schools aren't as committed to athletics. They don't have the money, even if they wanted to be. And from a brand standpoint, I just think that would have been a really tough pill to swallow. And even if you renamed that league the Pac-12 for the IP and whatnot, everyone still would have mocked Oregon State and Washington State for, being in the Mountain West. And you're still going to get some of that now, although I keep saying it's disingenuous and lacks context. From this standpoint, they at least maintained their control of the league. They get to keep the Pac-12 banner, which does have a lot of value, regardless of who's in the league. It's a more valuable, more recognizable brand with more historical significance than the Mountain West. And that's why you want that flag. It's why you want to be under that logo. But they wanted to choose the schools that they felt would give them the best opportunity to basically stay afloat until you're able to get some momentum going and get your legs paddling and work your way towards shore, which is hopefully in 2030 when you see the league, after having established a base and had some success over a 5-year stretch, is then able to potentially make some more moves. And there's still a lot to be determined down the road. What all comes next for the Pac-12, what the rest of the media rights deal is going to look like, all of that. There's still a lot to be sorted out, and I'm interested to see how a lot of that pans out. But for people to act like adding Texas State was this boneheaded decision, or it's a move that's going to kill the league or something like that, I just disagree, because the TV outlets have made it clear that the base that they have is intriguing and that there's a desire to have that product. There weren't that many other schools that they could do to significantly increase the money. So now it just becomes a matter of how do we pull this off in a smart way, give ourselves a chance to succeed, a chance to remain relevant, and hopefully, take things to the next level from there. I just think that there's an opportunity for this conference to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a competitive product on the football and basketball side of things. And if it's entertaining games, if it's, competitive matchups week after week, especially like late night in a time slot where you're not going to have quite as much competition, you're not running at the same time as those Big Ten games or stuff like that, people are going to be into it, especially with sports betting and everything else now. Like, people will be into the Pac-12 if the product is entertaining, if it's competitive games, and people will be into it. And that's why, like, with the media rights deal, yes, there is a bottom line, and that matters. There's, a certain figure that you need to make this all work. And I think they're going to get that. Like, I don't think they're going to dip below 8 million on the media rights deal, which, again, if you double your money, how's that a failure? It's maybe not the higher side of projected outcomes that we all hoped for, but it's not like that should have been the expectation or anything like that. But you just need an opportunity here. You need an opportunity for exposure to rebuild your brand. And if you have games, that are competitive for a couple years there, people are watching it, you get some momentum going, you're going to be in a really good spot. And I think staying lean makes sense. I don't think there will be a ton of significant moves for the Pac-12 between now and 2026, now that they figured out the league. I think, again, like, a lot of this is intentional to stay lean. Another reason you don't want to have a 14-team league and have if you're the Pac-12, the reason you didn't support the reverse merger is it's basically the WAC in the 90s at that point. You have so many mouths to feed, and you have schools that are taking pieces of the pie without increasing your potential revenue. They're only taking in that situation. They're not adding anything. And that's why the reverse merger didn't happen. Like, it really is that simple. I know that sounds kind of cold of me, and I hope that people understand, look, what I'm trying to say. This isn't from a rah-rah, suck it Mountain West standpoint, because, again, the Mountain West is all I've known. I'll be rooting for the league to remain alive, even if it will be weird to see Wyoming playing Northern Illinois and UTEP and some of the other schools that they're going to be associated with in league play now. But there are just some cold, hard realities that have been really intensified. Like all of this stuff has always mattered in the scheme of things, but in the modern arms race that's become college football, and with the amount of money that's now, floating around out there, it's all just become so intense. And there's some real negative consequences of that. A lot of history being thrown out the window. I'm not ignorant to all of that. It's weird to me to think how much is going to change. But I mean, this is what college football has always been. I mean, you can go back to the Southwestern Athletic Conference and the Big 8, and then, becoming the Big 12, and then obviously like Nebraska and CU and Missouri move, and it's always been a thing. The Mountain West was a product of conference realignment because the WAC kept adding too many schools. Like, this has always been a thing. It always will be a thing, and that's why it's important to remember that the Pac-12 in 2026 is probably going to be different than a potential Pac-12 in 2036. You have no idea how this is all going to shake out over the next 15 years. But the point is, you give yourself a chance. You take that leap of faith, because if you don't do anything, you are guaranteed to fall into irrelevancy, to not factor into modern college football. So why not take some swings at the plate? Like, why not give yourself a shot? Why not bet on schools that have a track record of athletic success, who have invested in facilities enough to, at least hang, with the bigger schools. I've been to a lot of these other schools, man. I've been to the University of Arizona. There is not shit about that campus, about their facilities, that's superior to CSU. It's just not. Like, I've been to a lot of these schools in the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and we're all very similar. Fort Collins as a college town, CSU as a campus kicks a lot of these schools' ass. And I just get tired of the snarkiness and some of that stuff. Like, I just think the league is going to be fun. Kevin in the Toyota chat says the bettors love Pac-12 after dark. That's what I mean. I just think there's an opportunity here to really lean in. And I will say, and we better brace ourselves for it, it's going to be a lot of late night games, like home games, 8 p.m., 8:30, even 9 p.m. The most valuable asset the Pac-12 has from a broadcasting standpoint is filling that late night window for, ESPN, whoever it ends up being. So they're going to have to lean into that. There's no perfect world. It's going to be a little bit an inconvenience for the folks coming from Denver. It's tougher for families logistically. As somebody who creates content, it's tough on me when you're at 2 a.m. after, press conferences trying to get all this content out. It's not the most optimal scenario, but hey, beggars can't be choosers, and we're basically just trying to stay alive here. I said it last Friday, but it felt like, the Big Ten and SEC, that we were all on an island together, and they took the speedboats, and then, there were a couple of rafts, banana boat inflatable rafts, and the Big 12 and the ACC, they floated off on those, and the rest of us, we had to patch together a raft out of wood here, and we're just hoping that we can reach land eventually. I think we've made the best out of a tough spot. And no, it's not perfect. No, it's not necessarily a power conference of old, but I do think it's definitively the 5th best conference. You're going to have access to the college football playoff. You're going to have a college basketball product that's competitive with all the other leagues in the country, potentially even superior, especially if you were to add somebody like St. Mary's on top of Gonzaga and everything else you've got going on. CSU, San Diego State, Boise State, all really good programs. Utah State. The future is bright, and you can let the internet do its thing. There's going to be a lot of dumb takes. There's going to be a lot of commentary that's lacking all of the context that we've just spent 30 minutes rambling over. But at the end of the day, if you're CSU, if you're Boise State, if you're San Diego State, this is a bet on yourself. It's a leap of faith, and it's one that I can get behind because we were already left behind. So what do we have to lose? What do we have to lose? That's what I would say to any of the cynics out there. And to the trolls that will inevitably hop in my mentions from Boulder, as it always tends to go, I will point out we will be going into the Pac-12 with as many titles as CU left with after 14 years in the league. All right, let's take one last break, then we will wrap it up. If you've got any questions, comments, shout them our way in the Toyota chat, and I'll get to as many as we can. Coors Light encourages you to never lose your chill. Life's going to test you. My air conditioner went out this week. It's been a process for like a month now. Thought we got it fixed. Now it's definitively out. Can't replace the AC without replacing the whole furnace. So we're talking, like 15 plus grand. Don't have that kind of money. Just got this house like 6 months ago, so that's a kick to the nuts. I'm not gonna lie. It's tough, but there's nothing we can do about it, right? So we went out, we bought some window AC units, trying to make the best of a bad situation. Not too dissimilarly from the Pac-12, life is all about the little things, how you deal with them. That's up to you. I did a little bit of yard work, got a sweat going, was able to get over the stress, then had to do it. Crack open a nice cold Coors Light when the mountains turn blue. Cold as the Rockies, Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smooth finish. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're hauling the weight of the world, whether you are going off-road, hitting the western slope, something like that, Toyota has an SUV that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma, the Land Cruiser's back. They've got 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, which you really need in Colorado. They've got more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and an official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. All right. I'm going to get to your questions and comments. If we're still desperate for time, maybe I'll get into the 5 toughest games, but I think I'm going to save that for tomorrow. Mostly because I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what we're going to talk about on July 3rd. If you've got any topic suggestions, send them my way. You can tweet at me at Justin T. Michael or DNVR_Rams. Kevin Young says, no one can honestly tell me they would prefer to be in a league without Boise, San Diego State, and Fresno State. Exactly. Even if Texas State doesn't move the needle, even if they aren't like the major PR win, this big splash, look at those 2 leagues and tell me which side of the fence you would rather be on. It really is that simple. Josh says maybe this will get those left behind to finally invest more. That's a tough one, to be honest, because I get what you're saying, and like it should be a wake-up call, but it's also, if you don't have the money in the first place, it's not all of a sudden going to appear. New Mexico is a really poor state. There are a lot of things that need to be invested in that state, from like education and healthcare, that the university is competing with, and that's a legitimate hurdle. Wyoming, very similar deal. There are real hurdles that are not necessarily something you can control, especially if you're in a league that's not getting the same type of media dollars that the big boys are. But it should be a wake up call for some of the schools that are kind of on the fence there. To me, where it's more confusing is like the AAC schools who are content remaining in a league that no longer has the majority of its face brands and really nobody cares about. I know they've got a nice little TV deal that's superior to the current Mountain West, but it's not going to be superior to the future Pac-12. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to me. Josh says, all right, we need a pregame meal spot tier list if we are going to start getting late night kickoffs. That's a great summer content idea. Might even get it on the show tomorrow. We could go through the best spots to, get a pregame meal in Fort Collins. Just off the top of my head, obviously, you got like the Crazy Carls of the world. Anything by campus is going to be clutch. Jim's Wings, I'm a Wing Shack man. I'm not going to lie. Gotta be loyal to the brand. Gotta be loyal to my bro. But right across from Moby, did hit up Jim's Wings quite a few times when I was a student, and even when I was a grown up. That feels weird to say. All right, got a couple questions that we starred here. Kevin wants to know, if that is the case, is it crazy to think about the total media deal being in the $12 to $15 million range? I wouldn't say it's crazy or impossible. I would say it's unlikely. My guess is that 12 is probably on the higher side of where they could realistically come in. I think 8 is kind of the floor of what you need to hope for. Double your money, be able to, pay for some of these costs that are going to be associated with the move. And obviously we'll see how the the litigation process plays out with the poaching fees. Good God, between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West and all that kind of stuff. If I had to like put my money on it, I'd say it'll probably be in that like 9.5 range. I'd really like to see them get north of 10. I think if they do, I just think that really opens up a lot of possibilities, and it makes it easier to increase your investment in your athletic department, especially for a school like Texas State, who I pointed out will be, on the lower side of things from an athletic spending standpoint. They need to get more in line, with the CSUs of the world and really significantly increase their athletic spending. If you're getting far more in media rights, it makes that process much easier to do. But again, I'm expecting it to come in around that 9.5, 10 range. Anything more than that, huge win. As long as it's not drastically below that, that's a win to me. Because you got to remember, the bottom line is a big factor here, but exposure and visibility, especially in the initial stages of this Pac-12 and just trying to generate traction and get some momentum rolling again, that matters just as much. Like, that's why the CBS deal is significant. That's why being streamable with Paramount Plus would be a big boost for the CBS Sports Network games. Like, CBS Sports Network is already one of the tougher channels to access. For a long time, they weren't on DirecTV. Now I think they are, which is huge. You have to have like an advanced sports package though. So like if you can stream it, just makes it easier for some of the younger people. But you got to remember, like, would you take $1 million or $2 million less off the bat if it meant your games are all going to be on really accessible linear TV channels? I think the answer is probably yes. And I think there's a lot of potential there to have that happen. You got your main games on CBS Sports Network will have it, but can you get in a deal with CW and, Turner Sports or ESPN or whatever, and get those tier 2, tier 3 games a lot more visible than what we had seen in recent years, with a lot of those games being on FS1, FS2, CBS Sports Network, or even worse, the Mountain West Network, which at least was free. Pointed out a lot. There were a lot of games I couldn't watch in my childhood, and I would have loved to have had something like the Mountain West Network. At least we have the option to watch them. But from a broadcast quality standpoint, it was obviously not super ideal. Crackers College Hoops, shout out to my guy Swole. Everywhere I go, people ask me how many games Norvell has to win this year. What is a good answer? I think the answer is more complicated than just picking a number, because I think based on just the reaction from last year, where they won 8 games and beat 2 rivals for the first time in a decade, beat Air Force in the Springs for the first time since 2002, and the only thing the fans talked about was how they didn't beat anybody of substance. I think this season has to feel like 2014 in the sense of it needs to feel like it truly is different. Like, this team isn't an anomaly. It's not a flash in the pan, but it's the start of potentially something special. And I think to do that, you've got to probably win, if you're picking a number, I think at least 8 games. But I think who you beat and whether you are realistically in the mix for a conference championship those last couple of weeks of the regular season, which are going to be really challenging. And we'll talk about that tomorrow when we get into the toughest games of the season. I mean, you go to Boise at the end and then you host Air Force. That is not an easy way to wrap up your year, especially if you're potentially coaching for your job or you're trying to, play your way into the title game. Like, there's a lot that could make both the end of the conference slate and the end of the non-conference slate very, very interesting, depending on how they do things here. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out. I think they've got to be legitimate contenders. I think you've got to win at least one trophy game. Like, maybe you can get away with losing to Air Force at the end of the year. Although if that's what keeps you out of the title game, that's certainly going to sting. Or if that's like what prevents you from making the postseason or doing something, beyond that. But I just think that I think it's going to be more about how the wins are weighted and the quality of the record than just a figure, if that makes sense. I didn't explain that very eloquently, but in my head, it made sense. All right, before we get out of here, again, if you got any more questions, comments, keep them rolling. We'll get to as many as we can here. Sounds like the Kings are interested in bringing in Russell Westbrook, which, as my guy Swole's Cracker Hoops tweeted, Steve Ivy, that is not a situation I would be interested in. If there's, I just feel like the Kings have enough of those has-beens in their locker room who are going to, like the Zach LaVines of the world. And it's not quite fair to call Zach LaVine a has-been, but just guys that are proven NBA talents, but maybe not the stars that they think they are. Like, I don't ever think that situation is great for a locker room when you've got up and coming talent that you're trying to build and develop around, but we shall see. Shout out to the folks that have sent me some movie suggestions in recent weeks and TV suggestions. I appreciate you guys checking out Shrinking and Mayor of Kingstown right now. 2 shows on the opposite end of the spectrum, but great acting, great writing. Might try and go see the F1 movie over the holiday weekend. Shout out to everybody that was rocking with us this morning. Thank you for putting up with me, even in the slow times of year, even when I'm mumbling and stuttering and then not speaking as smoothly as I typically do, like today. But I appreciate all of you so much for making all of this possible. Check out the newsletter. Make sure you're keeping up with the website. Check out all of the premium written content we have for you. I want to shout out our guy Dion behind the scenes, producer, making everything work so smoothly. I would not be able to do it without our awesome production staff. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.